Good evening. We're coming on with the latest in the Alabama special Senate election. NBC News reports Democrat Doug Jones is the apparent winner over Republican Roy Moore. It's a stunning upset for Jones, who appears to be the first Democrat Alabama has elected to the U.S. Senate in 25 years. Moore in recent weeks was hit with allegations of sexual misconduct involving teenage girls. This is a live picture now of Doug Jones at his headquarters in Birmingham. The write-in votes, we should note, will be counted next Tuesday. That will be a determination of whether there will be a recount. But for now, NBC News is reporting Democrat Doug Jones is the apparent winner of the Alabama special Senate election. We can put up the boards for you and show you where things stand in that race right now as they continue to count votes. Doug Jones with 50 to 49 over Roy Moore right now, a vote difference of just under 9,000 as they continue to tally the votes. We'll continue to follow this. Stay tuned for your local news and much more tomorrow on Today. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Good evening.
We can now call the race in Alabama. Fox News is now projecting that Doug Jones will defeat Republican Roy Moore to become the first Alabama Democrat in a quarter century to be elected to the United States Senate.
This is a dramatic Democratic upset in deep red Alabama, and it cuts the GOP Senate majority from 52 to 51, further dimming Republican hopes of enacting major legislation backed by President Trump. But as we pointed out, it's likely that tax reform is going to be voted on in the conference committee prior to the seating of this senator.
You know, there was a lot of discussion about whether or not a Roy Moore win would be a win, really, for the GOP. And there are some questions tonight about whether or not there's some silver lining perhaps for Republicans tonight. A victory by Moore, who is embroiled in a sex scandal, might have made it more difficult for the GOP to gain control of the Senate in next year's midterm elections. And, you know, we have watched as Democrats have made that a major talking point in recent weeks.
Looking live now.
Pointing the finger at sort of a war on women, too, with regard to this. Brett.
Looking live at the Moore headquarters in Montgomery and the Jones headquarters in Birmingham. This word just getting out as we are making this race.
CNN projects Doug Jones, the Democrat. He will be the next United States Senator from Alabama. He beats Roy Moore in this really exciting contest. Doug Jones comes from behind, takes the lead, and now CNN projects he will be the next senator. First time in 25 years that a Democrat will be elected senator from the state of Alabama, a ruby red state, a very Republican state. But Doug Jones is the winner. CNN projects that he is the winner in this race. This is a huge moment, a huge win for the Democrats, a huge setback for the president of the United States. They're getting excited over there at Doug Jones headquarters. Let's go over to Doug Jones headquarters. Alex Marquardt, you're there. They just got the news. We made the projection. Doug Jones has been elected the United States Senator from Alabama.
Wolf, it is absolutely deafening in here. This news just coming across the screen there from the horse's mouth. I can barely hear myself. Absolute jubilation. This is coming in a lot sooner than people thought. I'd been told by senior campaign sources that they were expecting this to go on all night. They thought it was going to be extremely close and that it would come down to a coin flip. And now here in this ballroom at the Birmingham Sheraton, you've got people pouring in to see the fact that for the first time in 25 years, a Democrat will be representing Alabama in the Senate. This was always going to be a competitive race, but it was Roy Moore's race to lose. Those allegations against him made this a very competitive race. The last few days, Doug Jones has been has mounted a massive get out the vote campaign to peel off Republicans and African American voters. Clearly, that paying off.
This is an ABC News special report. Now reporting George Stephanopoulos.
We are coming on the air with results from that dramatic and consequential Senate race in Alabama. President Trump has just tweeted his congratulations to the Democrat, Doug Jones, who has defeated Republican Roy Moore, becoming the first Democratic senator from Alabama in a generation. Of course, in the final weeks of this campaign, Moore was confronted with multiple allegations of sexual misconduct, some with teenagers. There you see Doug Jones there. He's already congratulated the people of Alabama as well, thanked them for giving him this victory. It's a remarkable Democratic win in a deep red state. I want to go to our chief national correspondent, Tom Yamas, at Moore headquarters in Montgomery. And Tom, clearly those allegations made the difference.
George, most of the Roy Moore supporters I spoke to over the last month didn't believe those women. But tonight, enough voters did to tip the scales and send a message across the country, not in our state. Now, Roy Moore denied those allegations, and President Trump, who is so popular in this state, still couldn't rescue his campaign. Just north of us in Birmingham, that is the victory party for Doug Jones, the first Democrat elected to the Senate in 25 years here from Alabama. But not even President Trump could rescue the Moore campaign. Apparently, Roy Moore was a lost cause. George?
Sure looks like. I want to bring in our senior White House correspondent, Cecilia Vega, as well. Tom talked about the president's popularity, won the state by 28 points last time, but he had taken a real hit. It showed up in the exit polls.
George, without a doubt, this race in Alabama was 100% a referendum on President Trump. The president initially distanced himself from Roy Moore and those allegations, but then he went all in with a full endorsement, even as it renewed his own sexual misconduct allegations. Moore's campaign spelled this out in plain terms. A vote against Roy Moore was a vote against Donald Trump, George.
The Democrat Doug Jones, the winner in Alabama, first Democrat in a generation from Alabama.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano alongside CBS News political director Steve Chigueras. For the first time in 25 years, a Democrat has been elected to the Senate from Alabama. Former U.S. Attorney Doug Jones picked up Attorney General Jeff Sessions' Senate seat in Alabama.
Jones defeated Republican Roy Moore, the embattled former Chief Justice who is facing numerous allegations of sexual misconduct. Jones addressed supporters after narrowly winning Alabama's open Senate seat. Let's listen to.
And NBC News is now calling Doug Jones the apparent winner in this special Senate election in Alabama. That's NBC's call at this hour, 13 minutes before 11, the apparent winner in Alabama. And Rachel, we can expect the congratulatory presidential tweet any moment.
Yes, I'm sure. And the peace be with you. And we are all Americans first. And we look forward to reaching across party lines. It's going to be nice when I wake up. Yeah, we shall see. I mean, how the president reacts to this. Obviously, this is a loss for the president because he came out so overtly for Roy Moore. It would have been a loss for the president, too, had Roy Moore been on his way to Washington. Yeah. Just a loss of a different kind.
Steve Kornacki, we now have an apparent winner.
Yes, I was wondering when that was going to happen. Yeah. So there you go. Look, we were talking for a week or two in the run-up to this thing about what the formula would be if a Democrat's actually going to win a Senate race in Alabama. And let me just remind you what those keys were. Number one, we said not only does Jones, the Democrat, need to get the level of support that Barack Obama got from black voters. And the exit poll tells us he got exactly that same level of support, 95% for Obama among black voters and 95% for Jones among black voters. But more importantly, he needed to get that turnout. And we tracked this throughout the night. The heavily black counties that make up this part of the state, in one county after another, we saw their turnout relative to last year's presidential election much higher than we saw in other parts of the state, predominantly white rural counties of the state. So you had black voters who were not engaged in the 2016 campaign getting engaged in this race. And meanwhile, you had white voters, that similar level of engagement in those rural areas wasn't happening. So you got the black support for Jones. You got black turnout for Jones. You had a bit of depressed white turnout in some of these rural areas, especially down here where Roy Moore's people, they were talking about this like a broken record, that this was going to be their area of the state. Well, they didn't. They got the numbers in terms of the percentages of the vote, but not in terms of the turnout of the vote. And then that alone was never going to be enough. The other question here was the suburban parts of the state, white college-educated suburbanites. We showed you this was a big one. I'll show you again, Lee County. I am still floored by the numbers I'm seeing here because Roy Moore, even nearly losing statewide 5 years ago, he won this county with 53%. Look at that. He barely got 40% tonight. The same thing happened across the state in Tuscaloosa. Moore got close to 50% here last time out, only 41% tonight. These are college towns, University of Alabama and all Auburn. So again, you got those defections from college-educated voters, college-educated suburbanites that the Democrats needed. And again, it's at 10,000 votes right now. We said, look, if there was a campaign that a Democrat could win Alabama, it would have to be this one. And the Democrat has indeed won Alabama.
We have shown not just around the state of Alabama, but we have shown the country the way that we can be unified.
Wolf, it is absolutely deafening in here. This news just coming across the screen there from the horse's mouth. I can barely hear myself. Absolute jubilation. This is coming in a lot sooner than people thought. I'd been told by senior campaign sources that they were expecting this to go on all night. They thought it was going to be extremely close and that it would come down to a coin flip. And now here in this ballroom at the Birmingham Sheraton, you've got people pouring in to see the fact that for the first time in 25 years, a Democrat will be representing Alabama in the Senate.
Breaking news, the Democrat Doug Jones defeats Roy Moore in the deep red state of Alabama. And guys, make no mistake about it. May have been in the state of Alabama. This is going to play out all across the country for a very long time.
Absolutely, George. And Jones saying last night, we have shown the country the way that we can be unified. But still no concession speech from Roy Moore.
And the final vote, we must say, was extremely close. It appears that women played a crucial role. They made the difference for Jones over Moore.
More fallout for the Me Too movement. We want to get straight to our chief national correspondent, Tom Yamas, in Montgomery, Alabama, with all the latest. Good morning, Tom.
George, good morning. Let me set the scene for you last night. It was about 9:30 local when the Moore campaign realized something was wrong. The room fell silent and the campaign manager came out to the watch party and asked everyone to start praying. But those prayers were not enough. The accusations against Roy Moore and Doug Jones' tireless campaigning put Roy Moore away.
Thank you. Thank you.
This morning, for the first time in 25 years, Alabama is sending a Democrat to the U.S. Senate.
We have been at crossroads in the past, and unfortunately, we have usually taken the wrong fork. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you took the right road.
Doug Jones beating Republican Roy Moore in one of the most conservative states.
We have shown not just around the state of Alabama, but we have shown the country the way that we can be unified.
Moore unable to recover from accusations he molested 2 teenage girls when he was in his 30s. Accusations he denied, but blamed for not coming out on top.
Part of the problem with this campaign is we've been painted in an unfavorable and unfaithful light. We've been
put in a hole.
Moore refusing to concede, telling his supporters the race wasn't over.
Realize when the vote is this close that it's not over.
Signaling he would favor an automatic recount if Jones's margin of victory is less than half of 1%. Currently, that margin is 1.5%, with 1,348,319 of the ballots counted.
Let's go home and sleep on it. We'll take it on tomorrow.
But even his biggest supporter, President Trump, accepting defeat, tweeting, "Congratulations to Doug Jones on a hard-fought victory." And the Alabama GOP putting out this statement, saying, now that this race has ended, may this holiday season of peace, love, and hope resonate with everyone, regardless of one's political affiliation.
And as of last night, the Secretary of State in Alabama said a recount would be highly unlikely at this point. And earlier this morning, the president weighing in again, sounding like he may have a bit of buyer's remorse. Let's put that tweet there up on the screen. The president tweeting, "The reason I originally endorsed Luther Strange and his numbers went up mightily is that I said Roy Moore will not be able to win the general election. I was right. Roy worked hard, but the deck was stacked against him." We should point out Luther Strange's numbers did not go up mightily after that endorsement.
And the president pushed hard for Roy Moore in those final days. Okay, thanks very much, Tom.
Now on this, we want to bring in CBS News political director Steve Chigueras. All right, so Steve, maybe some people were surprised. It was so close to call, I think, yesterday that I know I put $1 one way, and it might not have worked out for me because I really didn't know.
How'd you do? Did you win?
I did not win. I did not win because honestly, I thought Roy Moore was going to eke out a win here, and he didn't. Take us through it. How did Doug Jones win?
Well, it was a confluence of things. Mainly, the turnout for Jones was, I think, higher than I think anybody thought it was going to be. Right. Democratic turnout was higher. Places where Republicans normally turn out was lower. And you put that all together, and next thing you know, a state that normally votes in Republicans by wide margins did not vote Roy Moore in. Now, African-American voters turned out in higher numbers than I think people thought was going to happen. Democrats are very excited to see that. Generally, I think what you saw in this race was enthusiasm among Democratic voters and not so much about Republicans. Now, what that means going forward, a lot of people are going to want to read into this and say, oh, wow, this is a terrible sign for President Trump and for 2018. Let's also keep in mind, it's a terrible sign for Roy Moore. The guy was an extremely flawed candidate even before the allegations about sexual misconduct came out. You add that to the mix, and it's very clear that Republicans were not that enthusiastic about going out and voting for this guy.
So you think this is more about the candidate more so than the repudiation of the president, so to speak?
I think the specific results are yes. However, I do think there are many warning signs for Republicans moving forward, and I think Republicans are going to have to wake up and realize that in the races we've seen this year, special elections, the gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey, Democrats and Democratic voters are much more enthusiastic about the elections this year, and they're going to probably carry that enthusiasm into next year. Republicans have not shown that enthusiasm. They've got to figure this out. President Trump, Republicans in Congress, they need to figure out how to get Republican voters excited about what they're doing and enthusiastic about what they're doing and get them out there next year, or else they could be in big trouble in the midterms.
Enthusiasm seems to be kind of one of the things that are lacking out there with the discourse, the civil discourse that exists. Let's talk about President Trump's tweet, though, last night. The congratulations to Moore was kind of a little thinly veiled. Congratulations, even though the write-ins did, have a bigger influence than they should that he talked about. But the Republican Party this morning, they're waking up and seeing these results. What is the general theme today?
A couple of things. One, look, Republicans from the get-go here, when Moore got the nomination, is no good outcome for them because Moore is a controversial character. Then the allegations came out. He had been out there saying, I'm going to campaign against Mitch McConnell. I'm not going to necessarily work with Senate Republicans if I win. So even more, if Moore won, it would have been great for Republicans. I think there are a lot of Republicans in Washington who are breathing a sigh of relief that Moore lost this. Yes, they lost one seat in their majority. They have a Democrat coming in taking a seat that's been held by a Republican for a very long time. But the drama surrounding Roy Moore is now gone. They don't have to worry about that. There's that. There's what happens moving forward. You had the Steve Bannon effect, right? Steve Bannon has been a thorn in the side of Washington establishment, Washington Republicans, Mitch McConnell. They're looking at this and they're saying this is a huge loss, a huge black mark on Steve Bannon and his politics. And yes, he is pro-Donald Trump, but he's also anti-establishment. And they're looking at this and saying to Steve Bannon, if you're going to fight against us, you better put up good candidates, because this was not a good candidate, and we lost a seat that should have been won by Republicans. So Bannon's influence moving forward is going to be really interesting to watch. This fight between the establishment Republicans and Steve Bannon is going to continue. I want to see how Republicans figure out how to take Donald Trump's message, which I still think has some resonance, especially among Republican voters, but marry that to candidates who can actually win and will support the Republican leadership. That's going to be interesting to see if they can do that.
You're talking about Steve Bannon. He was on Breitbart Radio today and commented on the outcome of the race. Let's listen to that.
I mean, one thing you got to give a hat tip to, the DNC came in here, slipped in here underneath the radar, and did an amazing job of organizing, what's my favorite word, ground game.
Yes.
Right? Ground game. You got to, you got to give the devil its due. These guys, I tell people every day, there's no magic wand. You're going to have to outwork people. If you get outworked, you're going to lose. And I got to tell you, their ability to get out votes, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, the ground game was definitely a factor because his candidate disappeared for the last 2 weeks almost.
But in any other day, and any other candidate in Alabama, this is not a race. This is not a contest.
Yeah, right.
So, yeah, you can talk about the DNC ground game all you want, but it wouldn't have mattered if it weren't for Roy Moore. And Steve Bannon went all in with Roy Moore and almost actually won this thing, but it shouldn't have been this close. And again, I think what you're going to hear Republicans in Washington say is, listen, Steve Bannon, if you're going to do this, find candidates who aren't terrible candidates.
Well, that's the thing. Do you think anybody during this whole process was like, is this the best we've got? Is this the best that we could find in the state of Alabama?
But that's what you heard people say, and that's what you heard Richard Shelby, the Republican senator from Alabama, say. We can do better than this as Republicans than nominate people like Roy Moore. And the voters spoke. The voters of Alabama spoke, and I think that's going to resonate with many Republicans. The question is what is Bannon going to do moving forward? Is he still going to try to challenge incumbent Republicans because they're not 100% in lockstep with the president? And if that's the case, what is the alternative? Is the alternative somebody who can win in a general election and hold a seat that Republicans should hold?
Let me ask you this question. Do you think that the Republicans sort of dropped the ball long before, during the primary, because they backed Luther Strange, who might not have been the candidate that Alabama wanted? Wasn't the candidate that Alabama, and they blocked out other competition?
I think we have to remember this was a very unique situation. I know we try to take every one of these elections and say, oh, well, here's the broader explanation for all of it. But keep in mind, Luther Strange was named to this seat by a governor who had his own scandal that he was dealing with. And so he was tied to that governor. I think there was, Luther Strange was looked at in the eyes of the Alabama voters, at least the Alabama Republicans, as somebody who in his own way was flawed. Again, tied to that Republican governor who had his own problems. So Strange had problems from the get-go. Moore snuck in there, riled up the base, won a runoff, and became the nominee. It just was not a great setup for Republicans from the get-go. They probably could have found somebody. They probably could have set this up differently from the get-go.
Interesting to say the least. No wonder the entire nation was actually focused on this election of an Alabama senator last night. Steve, thank you very much. Thanks. Good to see you.
So Mr. Moore will not be going to Washington. Nancy Cordes has a reaction on Capitol Hill.
Look forward to having Mr. Jones here.
Republicans were so relieved today, you'd think they picked up a seat.
Strange to say, I guess, from my side of the aisle, but I thought it was a great night for America.
Alabamans didn't want somebody who dated 14-year-old girls.
Any anger they had was directed at Steve Bannon.
This is greater than Judge Moore.
For backing Roy Moore over the more mainstream GOP incumbent.
This guy does not belong on the national stage. He looks like some disheveled drunk that wandered onto the political stage.
On Breitbart Radio, Bannon said he simply got out-hustled at the end.
One thing you got to give a hat tip to, the DNC came in here, slipped in here underneath the radar, and did an amazing job of organizing, what's my favorite word, ground game.
Things are looking good for us.
Jubilant Democrats said a win in deep red Alabama shows they can easily pick up seats in Arizona and Nevada next fall and retake control of the Senate. Pennsylvania's Bob Casey said the GOP is on the ropes.
I do think they've got to examine how a nomination process led not only to Roy Moore, but to the nomination of President Trump. He was their nominee as well.
But Republicans like Iowa's Chuck Grassley insisted last night's loss had to do with one flawed candidate, nothing more.
What's the main lesson you draw from the loss in Alabama?
Oh, pretty clear that you should not be involved with sexual harassment of women.
Republicans are grateful they won't all get tied to Roy Moore when they run for re-election in 2018. They also avoid a messy ethics investigation and what could have been the first expulsion of a U.S. senator since the Civil War. Jeff?
Nancy Cordes, thank you.